Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of FearScape.
Unhinged! It sounds like Space Ghost! We got a cool episode for you guys. We're going to be going back in time. In time.
Like Huey Lewis.
Like way before Huey Lewis. Like before the 1980s. But if you want to know how far, you're going to have to stick around.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special message. Something is coming.
So yeah. Ancient civilization.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the origin of humanity.
Yep.
Okay, I've been dogged by this obsession with our origins over the last couple months. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it came from a conversation that the theologian and I had. But it all started with my lack of faith in the book of Genesis, which I'm not Christian, so really I guess it's a lack of faith in the entire Bible. But
lack of belief.
Yeah, a lack of belief that Christians would even believe Genesis is kind of where this came from, because it's such a far-fetched story with no proof that it was actually written by Moses, and the fact that there's no, Moses was not there at creation, and so therefore, and there's no thing where Moses is like, and God came down to me and told me the story of creation. He just writes about it.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, I heard this cool story around the campfire and write it down.
Right, and so through research and things like that, I started learning a lot about the history of humanity and the world from, first off, neighboring civilizations to the Jews, as well as civilizations around the world.
Yeah.
I'm starting to find out, and then through all of that research, getting into Gnostic texts and Dead Sea Scrolls and lost books of the Bible. Which, by the way, if you have not read the book of Adam and Eve, I think there's 2 parts. It's phenomenal.
Really?
Like, it really is weird and cool, and it really gets into when they get kicked out of the garden, and Adam kills himself 6 times. Because he doesn't know what to do. And God's like, no, come on, get back up. It's ridiculous because he's so frustrated because he doesn't know what to do. And the world is so barren.
Right.
Which, theologian, if you're watching, you're probably not. But if you are, I still want to know the answer to the question I have, is that if the Garden of Eden was a specific place that was not the rest of the world, because God sent him and Eve outside of the garden to the rest of the world. Why the hell did he create the rest of the world if Adam and Eve couldn't go to it?
Right. If the intent was them always to be in the Garden of Eden, why create everything else?
Right. And then we get into the whole thing that God is infallible and he always knew, then why even make them feel bad and whatever. But anyways...
Really, the Garden of Eden, though, was a different planet, and he just sent them to Earth.
Yeah, exactly. Which we're going to get into, because... Hey, guess what? Did you know that we have an offer for Gaia? Because through my searching, and this was completely on accident, I was just after Deep Space, I was looking for a new show to watch, and I started watching Ancient Civilizations, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, it's talking about what I was already thinking and reading about.
And really, to go back even further back in time for our research on the topic. There's that documentary that we found on Netflix by the woman who is, I can't think of what it's called, Secrets of the Bible or something of that.
Oh, yeah!
She talks about the fact that...
Oh, yeah, the theologian does not like her.
That the Jewish civilization was never monotheistic.
Yeah, it eventually became, but it did not have its roots in monotheism, which is true. Anyone can find that out, and if you didn't know that, Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jews were once polytheistic. But yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like Secrets of the Bible or something like that. And she also talks about how there is only one piece of proof that King David even existed, in which the theologian, when he went to Israel, got to see. But to me, that's still not proof enough. But for someone who had such a giant kingdom, and so did King Solomon, and all of that, there's no proof.
And so this relates, though, to the polytheism of ancient Jews relates to this ancient civilization show, because this ancient civilization show proposes that it's because the Anunnaki.
Right, and that's one theory, because the other part is, too, the Philistines. The Philistines, which I did not know this until I did some research, the Philistines were Greek. And they were an offshoot. They came from Greece. And so they brought a lot of that polytheism, and this was way early polytheism, before Zeus and stuff, early polytheism to that Middle Eastern area. But yeah, you've got the Mesopotamian culture, the Philistines, and you've got the Sumerians.
Right.
All of these have massive influences on Judeo-Christianity, to the point where I can't even deny it anymore. I can't. And it's going to be one of those things that if I get into a debate about it, it's going to get frustrating, because I've learned way too much, and I spent a number of years as a Christian and still appreciate the story of the Bible. And in fact, I constantly read the Bible as a way to be able to debate and to hold my ground, especially on things of homosexuality or racism or things like that. I want to be able to defend my liberal point of view, so I read the shit out of the Bible. But this stuff, in the research we found, especially in ancient civilizations and talking about the Anunnaki, it blew my mind.
There's so many similarities between, is it Enki and Enlil?
Yeah,
is that the two?
Enki
and Enlil. There's so many similarities between those two gods, or Anunnaki, if you will, and their relationship to God and Satan.
Right.
Their relationship to, like, Osiris in the Egyptian
and
text,
Ra,
and Ra, and to Jesus.
Yeah.
Osiris died was nailed to a cross and died, and so was Jesus.
And then I don't even have to tell you the Celtic stuff or any of the Native American ones that follow that same idea of dying and being resurrected, or the Star Child, or any of that stuff. But yeah, Enki and Enlil, and it's like, this gets into the Gnostic texts as well, because truth be told, there's not a massive amount of Sumerian stuff out there. And in fact, the Sumerian language is still a language we don't fully understand. The only reason that we're able to understand is because of the Babylonians, which are now the Iraqis. When they took over the land, because no one knows what happens to the Sumerians, much like the Mayans and things like that. They had this huge civilization and then gone. Now, more than likely, they just moved themselves into other, people groups and stuff like that. But the Babylonians were in love with the things that they found, and the writings, and they were able to interpret it, and so they interpreted the texts. And so we have the Babylonian texts, translations of that. But yeah, it's just the stuff that, and there's a lot of similarities here, and this is where I said it's not just in this this area, it's around the world, because there's this one singular event that shows up in damn near every origin story, which is the flood. The Great Flood, which a lot of people think that more than likely was indeed the ice caps melting after the Ice Age, which would make a lot of sense. And we could get into some really like space age stuff, which we're going to.
But the Great Flood could have also been because there was the fish people.
Right. The fish people come from the Dog Star, of course, from Sirius, and things like that. And so there's this idea that there's this fish people, which would have been perfect timing had they shown up during the flood, because guess what? they're fish people. So they would be able to swim
Right.
and survive and propagate essentially the human race, especially if, as some people believe, they were already mixing their blood or cloning or doing different things
Right.
to create a new type of human. This also goes into the idea of other civilizations existing pre the flood,
Yep.
which is why we find a lot of cities and things like that we have no record for underwater.
Yeah.
And so this, of course, makes the Lemurian and Atlantean conspiracy theorists go nuts.
Right.
You know, they're like, ah!
Well, every time we find a new kind of underwater civilization, that's the immediate guess is it's it's Atlantis.
Right, and I believe we talked to Alan Greenfield about this, is just talking about ancient civilizations here for a moment. We could just be in another age.
Right.
I mean, you know, if you watch that show Life After Earth, or Life After Civilization, they talk about that. It's like, there's a lot of stuff that would disappear. And how are we to know that the technology that these people had in a previous era was something that would be non-degradable?
Well, or even recognizable.
Right, or
If it
even
was-
recognizable.
If it was so far beyond our comprehension of what technology was, would we even know what it was?
Right, exactly. So, for example, we get into the Enki and Enlil idea, the Sumerian idea of Enki and Enlil, which we talked about because a lot of the Gnostic texts do. A lot of Gnostics believe that there are two gods of the Bible.
Yeah.
Some will say Enki and Enlil, some won't. But some will say that the fire and fury and damnation god that existed in the Old Testament was an evil god.
Yeah.
The demiurge, is that correct?
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
Yep.
They called him the demiurge. And then when Christ came along, Christ was more of the other god, the good, the god of light, and he defeated the demiurge. And there are some people that think that Satan and the demiurge are one and the same. There's a lot of different theories there.
There's a theory that also
That Satan is also in Leo as well, right?
And so because there's a part where they talk about Enlil is a friend of the humans that are in captivity, because they talk about the Garden of Eden.
Right.
When they translate it, works out to like a pig or a pen for keeping animals.
Right, and so let's talk quickly about the origins of the words Adam and Eden.
Okay.
So Adam, which we just said Eden, of course, was meant for pen. Adam was essentially animal. And Adam predates Judaism. It is not a Jewish word. It does not show up anywhere in the Hebrew language, the ancient Hebrew language or any of that. It is a Sumerian word that means animal. And they have their own story of the Garden of Eden as well. And in this story, the gods came down from the heavens and took essentially the cavemen, the Neanderthals or whomever was there, and turned them into slaves to work in the garden, which was the earth, to harvest and to make crops and all of that stuff. And
Mine
they
things.
and they experimented with humans to make them stronger, and even messed with their brains, which there are some theorists that believe we have something written in our brain that tells us we have to believe in a god.
Yeah.
Because that was all part of that enslavement from the Anunnaki.
So one of the stories in Genesis, as you know, is that Eve is tempted by the serpent.
Correct.
So one of the theories along with that is that Enlil was a friend of the people, and he wanted to teach them how to read and how to write and how to grow their independence, because he saw them more than slaves. And so Enlil was the serpent,
right?
that tempted Eve,
which
with
gets
knowledge.
us into the reptile people, right? There's a lot of people that believe the Anunnaki were reptilian, which would push the serpent theory. But yeah, Eve was not a singular person to them, but represented all women, because women were the ones that they were reading and staying at home. They were the ones that stayed in the community, according to the Sumerians. And worked differently, while the men were out in the fields, were hunting and doing the big burly men stuff. The women were the educated ones. Yeah. And so it was Enlil that came to the women to essentially tell them, hey, you don't have to live like this. And if you really break down the story of Genesis, they don't have free will. Adam and Eve don't have free will. What does that mean? That means that you don't know anything, right? That you don't have a choice in what you're doing. So why is it such a bad thing that they get that choice?
Right.
And this story explains that. That's the interesting thing about the Sumerian creation myth, is that there's an explanation for why these things happen. Right. Whereas in Genesis, there's no explanation. It's just men are dumb because they listen to evil woman who listened to the devil who might have been the snake.
Well, and then you have, so then, Enki goes off and he kills Enlil.
Yeah, for what he did.
Yeah. He establishes himself as the one true God.
The one true God, because he doesn't want anyone to remember Enlil or any of the other gods.
Takes what stories there were about the origin and rewrites them to be, I saved you with my grace.
Yes.
As opposed to you defied me.
Yes. And there are, I gotta say, there's a ton of evidence that fits this, whereas there is not a single iota of evidence that fits the Jewish and Christian story of creation.
Yeah.
There's not a single bit of evidence.
You can't use the Bible to reinforce the Bible.
No. Yet there are cities, there are tablets, there are things in multitude that describe this, as opposed to the singular book of Genesis that Moses supposedly wrote in I think they're trying to say 200 BC, but now they're starting to even see that more than likely it was written probably sometime in 600 BC, and there are others that think that it might have been even earlier.
AC.
Yeah, we don't know. Or later, excuse me.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's all over the place.
There's those, I can't remember the name of it. You're going to tell me, the council that got together.
The Nicene Council.
Right, that basically assembled the Bible.
Right, and this is another place where the theologian and I definitely disagree on. He comes at it from a very, not orthodox, but very educated viewpoint, from his point of view, from a seminary aspect point of view, which I dig. I love it because it's allowed me to open my eyes to other things. But at the same time, I come at it from a view of, yes, you could be right, but also so could this.
Yeah.
And the way I read the history of the Nicene Council is that there were many, many factions of Christians because there was no giant church at the time. I think we're looking at, was it 200 AD? 380? I can't remember. 2 to 600. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Comment below if you know.
Yeah, I don't recall. But anyways, they had the council, and they were trying to figure out a way to unify, to create a giant church, because some people were being persecuted, others weren't, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. All of this led to the Nicene Council and creating a singular book that they could all agree on, because the Church of Delphi was over here reading these texts, whereas this one was reading this text, and these texts conflicted with each other, which so does most of the Bible. And they were trying to figure out a way. The one thing that most of them agreed on is that most of them did not like the Gnostics. The Gnostics were a huge and powerful group of people that had a very, very different opinion of Christianity that did not have anything to do with our modern day tale of salvation and the one true God and things like that. They read the texts very, very differently. And these are the texts that the church then outlawed. Once they decided which texts were the official text, they outlawed everything else. And that's why we didn't find many of these texts until the 20th century, because they had been hidden away in caves.
So I'm going to try a little Braveheart here. So they're preaching They're preaching unknown sermons on outlawed texts.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. And a lot of these texts do get into this idea that Christianity isn't what it's cracked up to be, nor is some of the Old Testament. Yeah. I mean, we get into the book of Enoch and the book of Mary Magdalene, most of you have heard of the Gospel of Thomas. That's a pretty famous one, but there's also the Gospel of Peter, the Apocalypse of this and that. And I mean, there's a million books, and I've read a good amount of them, and they didn't fit the narrative that the church wanted at the time, which, in my opinion, led to a lot of the control the church ended up having, especially with its with its combination with the Romans, with Constantine and all of that, that led to an iron fist of Christianity that we have seen some very negative effects over the centuries.
So I don't want to make this all about Christianity.
Yes, sorry.
But what all this to boil down to say that there is a lot of other data or information available, if you just go look for it, that far expands and expounds on what Christianity has to say about the origin of civilization and the origin of humanity.
Right. If you're interested in alternate origins of humanity outside of the Judeo-Christian creation myth, look for it, because it's remarkable, and it explains a lot of the things that we see around the world. You know, the fact that we see astronauts and these carvings in South America from thousands of years ago, that these pyramids around the world that had no contact with one another are similar shapes and dimensions and all of these things, and there are these similar origins.
Precise. You know, when you get back to the whole, previous civilization technology aspect, when you look at our civilization and culture today, we can build buildings made almost entirely of steel and glass, yet we still do sculptures.
Yeah.
Because it's a form of art.
Yep.
So to assume that the Mayans had a sculpture because they could only work with stone is a poor assumption.
It is asinine, and it gets back into that humanity origin. And ancient civilizations, like I said, really talks about that the Anunnaki, that they came down and they essentially bred these humans based off of the proto-humans that were there, which explains the missing link. Created slaves, so to speak, until they just kind of left, I guess, or whatever Enki decided he was doing,
or overthrown,
we don't know. Especially if you watched our last episode where we talked about the deep space or secret space program. Especially if there are other species that are out there, and there's an intergalactic war that's happening, because there is talk that was another thing, is that they were creating an army, in a sense, and they also say that the Sumerians and stuff like that they rebelled.
Yeah.
That and Leo gave them the ability to rebel.
Well, and that they were actually. So we talked about there was something in the brain that had to seek. They actually mixed into that batch, if you will.
Yeah.
the ability to rebel.
Right, and there are a lot of hidden cities and buildings of the Sumerians that we still don't know a lot about, and that could be perceived as a cloning room. That could be.
You have there's just so much in the world that we don't know enough about that we take at face value. The age of the Sphinx. We haven't even gotten into that.
Oh man,
which we can't because we're really getting long on time.
Yeah,
but the age of the Sphinx. The fact that a lot of structures in the Sahara Desert date back to when the Sahara was not a desert.
Right, which would be pre-flood.
Right.
And that they have erosion, water-type erosion.
Not wind erosion.
Yeah, not wind or sand erosion, but water-type erosion. Specifically, the Sphinx has that. And how could that have happened if the Sphinx was made alongside with the pyramids and things like that in a time where the desert was dry?
Right. So
I don't know. There's too many unanswered questions for me to be able to say that this theory that, it had to be. The pyramids were made at that time, so obviously there's not enough evidence to tell me that isn't true or is true. So I think it might be.
Yeah, the big takeaway, if you will, from this particular video is to question everything.
Why not? What
have you got to lose?
Yeah, why not expand your brain? If for anything, fun. Fiction, if you want to just look at it as fiction. But it's like when the Christians don't even agree on creation. Right. Look at Ken Ham and the creationist versus many modern Christians, right? They can't even decide on creation, nor can scientists. Then why not? Could it be possible when there's evidence? Just because you ignore evidence doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right, exactly.
So, but yeah, of course, if you really want to dig in deep like we were, I recommend checking out Ancient Civilizations on Gaia. Gaia.com. You can go get a free trial through us. We've got an offer right now. Like I said, don't mean to be a commercial, but I mean, the show has really sparked us to want to do an Unhinged episode. FearScapePodcast.com/Gaia offer, GAIA offer, or go to YouTube or Wikipedia. Just search Sumerian creation myth, creation story, or Anunnaki. I'm not going to spell that for you because I have no idea. Enki.
Yeah, I don't know how to spell it. I just type in what I think it sounds like, and then something comes up.
I can spell Enki and Lil. Enki is ENKI, and then Lil is ENLIL. Those are the two brother gods, essentially, that came from the stars. So
Enki's also a wheel company.
Is it?
They make wheels for cars.
Inky is also what octopuses do in the ocean. Oops, did I make an inky? Anyways, we're gonna get out of here. Any final thoughts on the origins of humanity or ancient civilizations?
Only to say that we're only, I think, scratching the surface on what there is to find. Mm-hmm. And we'll probably do a follow-up episode.
For sure. I mean, if you look back, my final thought is you look back at Carl Sagan or even the new version of the Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, where they talk about the calendar of time, using a calendar to show you time, and how humanity supposedly is only within seconds of the entire month-long calendar of the world, like, so to speak.
Actually, it's the calendar of the month is the entire
universe, isn't it? Yeah, the entire universe, and humanity is just within seconds. So who's to say? I mean, we had dinosaurs here. There was obviously the ability to have life on this planet.
And that was 165 million years ago. To assume there was nothing in between dinosaurs and humans.
Right.
Stupid.
Like, that we only go back, like, what's humanity supposedly?
20,000
years.
Well, there's contention. Some people say a lot lower than that. But
well, that's what I'm trying to say.
But I mean, even if it's 500,000 years, that's still...
Yeah, there's plenty of time for another civilization.
Several other civilizations.
To have moved in.
Right.
And there are many planets that are further out from the Big Bang than we are, supposedly the point of going out there. So they could have been existing a lot longer than us. And we ain't even talked about the Mormons yet. And the Mormons and their idea that gods come from different planets and you get your own planet and, just things like that. And this idea that there was a civilization that existed in America.
Right. During the times of Jesus.
Yeah, during the times of Jesus that was made up of Jews. Wow. But who knows? What if Joseph Smith did find some golden tablets that had Sumerian or something on it?
I mean, in my opinion, they're just as believable as the Ten Commandments tablets.
That's anything else. I mean, heck, didn't Indrid Cold say that they had 20 and they were like, we just went ahead and went to 10?
No, that was John Teeter.
Oh, it was John Teeter. Sorry. I told you I still think Teeter and Indrid Cold might be the same person. But yeah, anyways, we'll get out of here. Thank you guys, as usual, for tuning in to FearScape Unhinged.
Make sure you hit that subscribe.
And that like.
And go ahead and click that bell so you know when we get new stuff.
That's right. Share this. Tell your mama. Tell your mama's mama. Tell your friend's mama. And your friend's mama's mama. All about FearScape. You can check out all of our stuff at FearScapePodcast.com. Even checking out Socialscape. If you want to submit a sighting of a UFO, a cryptid, a ghost, anything, we now have that ability for you to do so. We're trying to create a database, so send us your data, your information, and check out the cool shirts. Like, this is one you can get. FearScape. It's like landscape, but spookier, right? My friend Aaron made this, and there's all kinds of great merchandise on there. All that jazz. Anyways, thank you guys again. Yep. Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, you hang up.
Okay, no.